and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum, back from the dead.
And I'm Ann Northrup, back from whatever.
Welcome
and
back,
thank you to Maren Johns for doing a bang-up job last week.
We should say that next week you'll be away once again, and Maren will be back.
That is true. We're not quite doing every other week, but it so happens that we have this schedule at the moment.
Now, we're taping on November 1st. This is, and it's the start of Transgender Awareness Month, but on this show, every month is Transgender Awareness Month.
It's true. But we're not starting with that. We're starting with more on the frighteningly anti-LGBTQ House Speaker Mike Johnson. What a monster. But unanimously elected by his Republican caucus to be second in line to the presidency.
In better news, the first trans and non-binary referee in the NBA, the National Basketball Association, has come out.
That was a surprise. The suspect in the murder of gay and AIDS journalist Josh Kruger in Philadelphia has been arrested.
In New York City, they opened a 50-apartment home for LGBTQ youth, and they promise 15,000 more units within 15 years.
I hope so. It still doesn't sound like nearly enough, but progress. We're going to remember a great PFLAG leader, a pioneering trans psychiatrist, a Tony-winning composer, a leading lesbian golf pro, and a major LGBTQ and AIDS activist in Rochester, New York.
The Pope met briefly with leaders of Dignity, the LGBTQ Catholic group, but his big synod made zero concessions to the dignity of LGBTQ people or the equality of women.
It's kind of like Lucy with the football. And we're Charlie Brown. In Taiwan, the leading candidate for president in next year's election joined the Taipei Pride March.
And we're going to review the very gay Fellow Travelers on Showtime.
In fact, gay is the whole point.
So, Mike Johnson, for God's sakes, where do you start? What do you think's the most damaging thing? Revelations keep coming by the second about this guy. But what do you think's going to hurt him the most with average people?
Yeah, I want to not tread over my joke of revelations, so to speak. I think his. I think people are appalled that he's a hypocrite and a monster and just so right-wing and religious. He wants a theocracy. He's been working for it for years, and now he's on the verge of putting a lot of it in place.
Well, what's his first action? He gets down on his knees on the floor of the well of the House of Representatives to pray. I mean, even his Bible, which he says is his Bible, says, don't be ostentatious about your prayer, But Mark Molinaro, who's a Republican, semi-moderate, and they all voted for him, he said, nobody in my district gives up, and he used another word, crap, about who the Speaker of the House is.
Well, that's fine. I don't think most of the American public pays much attention to the details of politics. I have come to understand that we're the only ones who do. But he's got a lot of power. He is controlling what bills are voted on and how they're written. It's astonishing that he has that power, that the Congress is not more democratic in the way it does things.
Well, his whole election is really just due to Trump saying, this is my guy.
Well, the so-called moderate Republicans stood up to that by rejecting Jim Jordan, but then it was a matter of timing. This guy was in the right place at the right time. He had the right affect, and they were just tired. And they could see if they didn't elect him, they could spend another 6 months trying to elect a speaker.
And right out of the bat, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, they just took him because they didn't want to do it anymore. And he was wearing a suit coat, as they say, as opposed to Jim Jordan, and comes across as smoother and calmer, which is all a front.
Right. Now, right out of the gate, he gives an interview to Sean Hannity and he says, I get asked what I believe about every issue under the sun. He said, it's easy. Go pick up a Bible off your shelf and read it. That is my worldview. And
he says, I am a Christian, a husband, a father, and a lawyer or politician in that order.
Well, he and the wife, Kelly, conducted seminars on how to elect public officials who embrace the view that the United States has been and always should be a Christian nation. He's a dominionist. He doesn't care about climate change. The wife has taken down her website for her business, Onward Christian Counseling Services, which compares homosexuality to incest and bestiality. And of course, he's the chief architect of election denial. He wrote the plan that was supposed to keep Trump in office.
Well, let me run through a few facts in no particular order. He does take the Bible literally, and he was one of the chief supporters of the Ark Museum in Tennessee, Kentucky.
Yes, and if I may, he wants the Bible taught as a history text, a true history text in schools. I mean, you're allowed to have the Bible in schools as a cultural artifact, literature, basically, but it's not history.
And he wants that in all public schools. He supports dinosaurs at the Ark Museum because he is trying to compress history into about 1,000.
The world was created 10,000 years ago in 6 days.
He has taught online courses for Liberty University for years. I've been trying to look up what those courses were, but I'm sure they're not anything we would have liked. He has waged a years-long battle against any kind of contraception being legal or reimbursed or anything else.
Because not just abortion, contraception. And maybe we should run his videotape about mass shootings and that's relationship to abortion.
Some of y'all were around in the late 60s. You remember what that was about? The countercultural revolution, Woodstock and drugs and peace and free love and all that, but more about the undermining of the foundations of religion and morality. Because if you remember, in the late 60s, we invented things like no-fault divorce laws. We invented the sexual revolution. We invented radical feminism. We invented legalized abortion in 1973, where the state, the government, sanctions the killing of the unborn. All these things happened because, as collectively as Americans, we began to get together in growing numbers and thumb our nose at the Creator and say, we don't believe that anymore. We're rejecting the founders' natural law philosophy in favor of moral relativism, and we are going down another path. Now, what we tolerate in moderation, our children excuse in excess. What happens when you fast forward another 30 or 40 years? Well, here's a picture's worth 1,000 words. Go to the next one for me. I mean, we know that we're living in a completely amoral society. And so people say, how can a young person go into their schoolhouse and open fire on their classmates? Because we've taught a whole generation, a couple of generations now of Americans, that there is no right and wrong, that it's about survival of the fittest, and you evolve from the primordial slime. Why is that life of any sacred value? Because there's nobody sacred to whom it's owed. None of this should surprise us. And it leads in the next slide for me, it leads into just chaos.
I hope he's going to get a better suit now that he's speaker.
Oh, he's got better suits, but you hear the smoothness in his voice, that sort of alto or baritone voice.
As we said last week, he's a spokesperson for Alliance Defending Freedom, which is the totally right-wing anti-LGBTQ legal group.
A spokesperson. He worked for them. He did law for them. And he also was affiliated for a long time with Exodus International, which is the conversion therapy organization, which went out of business.
I have a question, Ann. Do you think that he not only promoted them, but that he was a client?
Well, you want to move on to your little rumor mill?
Well, look, I mean, and again, well, this isn't, I mean, this is something Mrs. Betty Bowers, the online put up. She wrote, what's up with Republican men, Matt Gaetz and Mike Johnson, taking in teenage boys? keeping quiet about it, then claiming they are adopted sons. We got pictures of Matt Gaetz and his quote unquote son. But when no adoption paperwork shows up, they change their story. And here is Mike Johnson. He was 25 years old, and he adopted a 14-year-old Black kid, also named Michael, I believe, who was not available for comment. What was going on? Now, look, he's just not first he said it was his son, adopted son, but he didn't adopt him. So what is going on? Now, look, I have friends who have done foster care with young people like that when they were early in their married years. You got some compensation for it, and you took in these troubled teenagers who could be quite a handful, and I respect that. But he's not saying that.
No, and here's something else. In that Hannity interview that you referred to, Hannity threw some of this stuff at him. Oh, you're accused of hating gay people and blah, blah, blah. And Mike Johnson says, who, me? Me?
Oh, he said, same-sex marriage, that was settled by the Supreme Court. Of course, he knows the Supreme Court can unsettle it.
And I'm a rule of law guy, and it's law because the Supreme Court decided it. So that's the way it is. And I love all people.
Yeah, well, keep your distance. He's now saying abortion is up to the states. Now saying that, but he was a big advocate of a national abortion ban. And, after the Maine massacre last week, he said, "Oh, now's not the time to talk about guns." But
no, it's all about the human. It's about the human heart. It's not about the guns.
It's about the guns. But
yeah.
he wants due process for George Santos.
So they were talking about him getting elected speaker, and he said his wife was on her knees, really, for 2 weeks in prayer to the Lord. And she is a faithful mother. He also said that he knew he was going to be elected when he looked up in the chamber and saw the face of Moses on the wall, and that this is ordained by God and all predetermined for him.
Well,
there are no coincidences. God raised us up.
He was scheduled to deliver the keynote in 2016 at a Bible conference hosted by the Kill the Gays pastor, Kevin Swanson. He was to address, quote, the Bible, equipping the man of God for politics and the culture war. Now, he did pull out of that, but he never condemned Swanson for the Kill the Gays campaign.
So you may be sitting there and saying, yeah, so what? He's a religious nut, but that's neither here nor there. Well, here's how it plays out. At the moment, the House is under fire, under pressure to pass a dozen appropriations bills. And his approach has been to say, we're going to do these one by one. We're not going to do the overall Christmas tree approach, and we're going to go through these. Well, they have passed now half a dozen of these bills, and every last one of them contains provisions that say, we will not punish any company doing business with the government if they discriminate against LGBTQ people. No company will be forced to have diversity, equity, and inclusion clauses. And in fact, we may rule those out. It is playing out in the Congress right this minute, a week or two after he's been elected, in the way they're writing these bills. Now, the Senate doesn't want that. The Democrats in the House don't want that. We may or may not be able to get rid of those clauses, those amendments to those bills.
Well, he's making, aid to Israel. He won't even address the Ukraine. He won't address the Ukraine war, but he's making it contingent on tax cuts to cover
for rich people. For rich people. And he's saying that they should take an equal amount out of the bill that funds the IRS because there are too many IRS agents. And who are the IRS agents going after? Rich people who are not paying their taxes. So not only will this not be an even swap of money, but the U.S. will lose a lot of money that the IRS was collecting because the IRS is an agency that makes money. But if you take their agents away, they will no longer make as much money. So what he proposes as an even swap of money, Israel money for IRS money, is in fact a way of increasing the debt by taking away the money that the rich people are paying.
Will we survive?
You know, it's a good question, and I don't yet have a feel for the answer. He's on thin ice, and he may or may not survive. The only thing I can hope is that the Democrats will retake the House in a year, and we can get rid of this guy one way or another.
Right. Let's hope so.
Yes,
and
I do.
God knows what else is going to come out on him. Well, let's go back to the infamous Matt Gaetz.
Okay.
He is accusing Representative Jason Smith of Missouri, the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, the most powerful committee in the Congress,
A Republican.
of living a lie. An apparent reference to Smith's once close relationship with the then closeted Representative Aaron Schock. They were known in 2014 for taking exotic vacations together on private charter flights originating in Schock's hometown of Peoria. That's Smith in the foreground, Schock in the background. Smith is unmarried and opposed to same-sex marriage, voted against the Respect for Marriage Act that protects same-sex and interracial marriages, and passed with significant bipartisan support. So much for peace in the Republican caucus.
They traveled a lot, and including to Brazil and Argentina.
Well, we're going to talk about their fellow travelers.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talked about George Santos. He pled not guilty to 10 new felony counts on Friday. 2 of his aides have been indicted. 2 of the new charges are aggravated identity theft. Each carry a 2-year minimum sentence.
So there was several of his Republican colleagues from New York, House members, regarded as a little more moderate, filed a petition to throw him out of Congress. But that may be delayed until a report of the Ethics Committee comes out in a couple of weeks. But one way or another, he's going to face a vote. Now, that's a really tough call for the Republicans in the House because they can't afford to lose a member of the Republican caucus.
You need a two-thirds vote of the House to get rid of him. Out by sexual independence, Senator Kyrsten Sinema just raised $200,000 from Republican mega donors, including Clarence Thomas's sugar daddy, Harlan Crow, who maxed out to her campaign. The recent poll says that Democrat Ruben Gallego, 41%, Republican election denier Carrie Lake, 36%. Sinema's at 15%.
Why don't they just give the money to Carrie Lake? I mean, really, why support Sinema? She's not going to do a primary with Gallego. She's an official independent now. All that's going to do is help him.
All right, moving on. The Anti-Defamation League has removed the virulently anti-LGBTQ libs of TikTok from its glossary of extremism. Chaya Raichik spends her whole life, she runs this thing, her whole pathetic life, sicking Proud Boys and other violent extremists on anything to do with gay or especially drag.
She was removed from the bad people's list by the ADL, was it?
Yes. They said, well, it's under review, but she's still on the list of anti-LGBTQ extremists.
She bullied them, and that's why they took her off the list.
Temporarily. Let's hope so. Get some.
Let's do a little trip to Florida.
Okay.
Well, first, you mentioned the big Orlando Pride last week by showing the Grand Marshal, but I thought we needed another minute on it because a big story of this is that they had the hugest turnout at Orlando Pride ever, 220,000 people. And the organizers were shocked by this. They had no idea so many people would show up. And this is why I say I'm optimistic, because since Trump was elected in 2016, as Joe Scarborough points out about 3 times a day, the Democrats have won virtually every election because the people, the grassroots people, are coming out and fighting back. Whether it was the abortion vote in Kansas or candidates all over the country in all kinds of states and districts that are considered more conservative. So when I see 220,000 people show up in Orlando, shocking the organizers, I say those people are out there and they're ready to come out and vote again.
Now, if they'd only get rid of Ron DeSantis and some of those Republican senators down there.
Well, there is more on him, but there is, this year's elections are this coming Tuesday, November 7th. And
people are voting right now, and LGBTQ candidates are running across the country. Go to victoryfund.org to see who, if you're interested. The most contested state legislative contests really are in Virginia, where a ton of money is being poured in, especially by supporters of Republican Governor Youngkin. They're spending very heavily. They're spending heavily on our sides. It's both houses are up for, he's not up, but both houses of the legislature are.
There's a huge vote on abortion in Ohio, which we may very well win. That would be another great harbinger of good things ahead. And big governor's races in Kentucky and Mississippi. We're trying to hold on to Andy Beshear, the governor in Kentucky, who has been really relatively progressive, and especially for Kentucky, where everyone else is a Republican. And we're trying to get rid of the Republican governor of Mississippi, Tate Reeves, who has alienated most of the population of Mississippi, and we're given a good chance of getting rid of him.
Well, they've changed the way they elect the governor of Mississippi. It used to be you had to win most of the, counties or districts or something. It's absolutely insane. It was like the Electoral College. The Supreme Court threw that out. Or maybe
now, Youngkin, meanwhile, in Virginia, is throwing voters off the rolls to try to increase his chances of his party doing well. He's not on the ballot this year. He was reelected, God help us all, 2 years ago. But he's trying to,
fascism with a smiling face.
Now, in Florida, Ron DeSantis is calling elementary school teachers who are progressive the equivalent of Hamas, or as Trump calls it, Hamas.
Well, they call all Democrats socialists and we have to slit their throat. I mean, this is what he says. We have to end their lives, slit their throats. The language, and DeSantis always goes around saying, I'm doing the will of the people. He designed the legislature, which is not representative of the people of Florida, to give him mandates for everything that he does, but that's fascism.
Well, that's why I'm glad that people are showing up for Pride in Orlando. I think there is a lot of pushback in Florida, and people are now making fun of DeSantis for wearing lifts in his shoes, and I don't think he's going to get any farther in his political career.
Haley's beating them now.
Yeah.
He wears real heels.
There's a campaign slogan. And DeSantis will not give up appealing the decisions in courts that have been throwing out his anti-drag law. We keep winning in the courts and he keeps appealing, and he just looks like a fool. And in Volusia County, Florida, there was a complaint that got the Bible removed from the school library as too sexual and too violent.
Wow, it's true.
Porn.
Just read your Bible.
It was returned to the library after a 3-day review. You know how long they put books about race or sexual orientation down for review? Years. But the Bible got reviewed in 3 days.
All right. In Vermont, the state's largest school district unanimously approved strong protections for trans students. Champlain Valley School District requires schools to let trans students access school facilities play on sports teams, and use pronouns and names that match their gender identity without informing potentially unsupportive parents. It closely follows trans and non-binary guidelines issued by the state agency in 2017, but it's much more decisive in its wording. 4% of high school students in Vermont identify as trans.
Well, before we leave national politics, let's combine that with Halloween and show what our local activists were doing here in New York yesterday for Halloween as we're taping. Rise and Resist, which has been outside the Trump trials endlessly and has been working for ages. They showed up again outside the courthouse where Trump is being trialed in his civil trial. And I particularly like some of these signs. Witches against Trump. Trump's lawyers are, wait a minute. Trump's lawyers are zombies.
Well, I mean, Rise and Resist is, it's fair to say, a predominantly LGBTQ group, yes?
Yes.
Yes. And they're out there. There are no Trump supporters outside these trials clamoring for his release.
No, there are not. He does not have a big fan club in New York outside the trials.
Right.
Excuse me, I've got a little shadow there I'm trying to get rid of.
In Tennessee, the ACLU is asking the Supreme Court to take their challenge to the state law banning gender-affirming care for minors. But in Idaho, the Ninth Circuit temporarily blocked Idaho from enforcing its big trans ban on the schools, where you have to only use facilities that align with your chromosomes and reproductive anatomy.
Yeah, they overruled the district court on that, which was nice. But in Tennessee, the state is rejecting federal funds to the tune of $8.8 million for HIV prevention and treatment and for trans health care because they don't want.
They hate us. They really hate us.
They do. Some of them do. Not everybody in Tennessee.
Please. I have good friends in Tennessee, Arkansas, all those places.
Yeah.
All right.
But we've got to increase their numbers.
And they've reintroduced the bill Mark Pocan did in the Congress to two bills to research and create a national museum of LGBTQ history and culture. Second time it was introduced. I'm sure that Mike Johnson will be taking that up shortly.
Well, luckily here in New York, there is a newly created American LGBTQ museum, which will have a national focus. And so that's a little further along, I think, than what Pocan's trying to create. But it would be interesting to have an LGBTQ museum on the Mall in Washington alongside all the other museums.
All right. In the National Basketball Association, Che Flores, did I say the name right?
Yeah.
Has come out as the first trans and non-binary referee in the NBA. Mm-hmm. Flores said, one piece that was missing for me was that no one knew how I identified. Being misgendered, she, her, just always felt a little bit like a jab in the gut. So came out behind the scenes, and that went well with all the folks there.
Yeah.
Been in the NBA for more than a decade, wants to be a role model for youth. I just feel like 100% myself now.
Congratulations, Che, who uses they, them pronouns. And really a little mind-blowing to think of a non-binary trans referee at the NBA. So good for them for being supportive.
In New York City, a 50-bed facility for homeless LGBTQ youth and young adults, 18 to 25, opened on October 24th in central Harlem. The third such project opened by something called Homeward New York NYC, which aims to build 15,000 such units over 15 years. The young people pay 30% of their income in rent, and they get a studio apartment and on-site services. Now, they have to be 25 or under to get in, but you never have to leave.
And in Newark, New Jersey, there was a nice tribute 20 years after her murder for Sakia Gunn, who was a young lesbian who, with a bunch of friends, went into Manhattan for an evening, went back to Newark, or waiting at a bus stop when a couple of guys came by and started flirting with them. And when they didn't respond, the guys asked them, why aren't you responding to cute us? And they said, we're lesbians. And the guys attacked them and killed Sakia, choked her to death. So the city, 20 years after that happened, has now renamed a street in her honor. And there is a very enthusiastic group of people celebrating the new Sakia Gun Way.
And 1 year after the horrific mass shooting at Club Q in Colorado Springs, killing 5 and wounding 17 more, it is going to reopen under a new name, The Q, and at a new location, the Satellite Hotel in South Colorado Springs. It will be managed by survivors of the shooting, and former employees are welcome to join the team. A memorial is also planned at the original location.
And in Philadelphia, another update on the murder of Josh Kruger, a well-known journalist on HIV and LGBTQ issues, him there with his cat. The suspect, who was on the run, came home and decided to turn himself in. So he is now arrested and charged with the murder. His family says this was all a very complicated story of drugs and sex and him being underage. That will all get sorted out.
Well, they say her mother says there's no excuse, but she feels her son is a victim as well. Anyway, okay. And then one of the 6 men arrested in the scheme targeting gay bars in 2021 and 2022, leading to the drug deaths of Julio Ramirez and John Umberger, pleaded guilty on October 23rd to grand larceny, robbery, and identity theft charges. Eddie Ashley had originally pled not guilty. Ashley is not tied to the deaths, however. 3 of those arrested face murder charges. Ashley expects to be sentenced to 9 years in prison on November 20th.
In Indiana, another detail revealed in the long-standing investigation of the murders of young men by Herbert Baumeister, a Republican official there who committed suicide in '96 after the police started he's on the right there, after police started finding thousands of bones buried in his yard in Indiana. So they've now discovered the remains, they've identified the remains of Alan Livingston there on the left. They did a DNA match. And so now there are officially 9 victims, but who have been identified. But the assumption is that there are many, many, many more.
Right. His mother shared her DNA, and that's how they were able to make the match. A lot of the families of the other people who were missing haven't done that.
Well, this all happened 30 years ago. And, like the documentary that you were featured in with the serial killer of young men.
Call.
Excuse me?
Last Call on HBO.
Thank you. HBO, Last Call. Families can sometimes be embarrassed about this or don't want to talk about it.
That case was cracked because family members, including heterosexual family members of some of the victims.
Finally did. Also in San Francisco, the police have ID'd a 6th victim of a killer from the 1970s, known as the Doodler, because he would sketch his victims that he killed. The killer was a black man stabbing gay white men, and they are here 50 years later. They are ID'd the victims still.
Right. A follow-up to the Bud Light controversy over Dylan Mulvaney, the trans influencer. On the one hand, Bud Light co-sponsored an LGBTQ Pride event, which set the right wing on fire again in Arizona. But on the other, on January 1st, Anheuser-Busch will become the official beer partner of UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship, earning right-wing anger at the UFC. Dana White of the UFC told Hannity The deal was an expensive lifeline to save Bud Light from that ghastly stunt last year. Or this year.
By the way, Mike Johnson has a number of corporate sponsors too who have donated to him over the years, including AT&T. Popular Information, one of my favorite information sources, tracks a lot of this. And Judd Legum, who writes that, had a column last week about all of Johnson's corporate sponsors.
We talk about the people that we've lost in the past week or so.
Please, yes.
Starting with Nancy MacDonald, who has died at 87. She was president emeritus of PFLAG in 1996. She was the only parent of an LGBTQ child in opposition, testifying at the infamous Defense of Marriage Act that passed Congress 5-1. Instead of defending marriage, she said, I need to defend people, gay and lesbian people who are being denied the right to marry. I think we would not be here today if society did not have a deep bias against gay and lesbian persons. Well, of course. She expanded the mission of PFLAG in 1988 to include transgender persons. Maybe that's 98. MacDonald, born in Nebraska, worked for the Tulsa, Oklahoma school district and integrated the schools there. Her daughter came out at 16, and she and her husband, Joe, funded the Tulsa chapter of PFLAG in 1987. In 96, they founded the Nancy and Joe MacDonald Rainbow Library at the Dennis McNeil Equality Center in Tulsa that includes 3,500 LGBTQ books, survived by Joe and their 4 children and 8 great-grandchildren.
See, another story that gives me hope. The heroes, the grassroots heroes who are out there doing this work on a daily basis, no matter what stands in their way, because they do have a sense of right and wrong, as opposed to Mike Johnson and his warped worldview. And then we heard about the loss of Susan Cowell in Rochester, New York, died of Alzheimer's. She was a nurse, and she co-founded AIDS Rochester in 1983, which was very early in the epidemic. She was the president and executive director of the Gay Alliance in Rochester. She started a lesbian art collective. She was a campaign director for Tim Maines, who was one of the first, I think he was in the first out elected official in New York.
To a legislative office, yes.
Okay. The mayor gave her a very eloquent tribute on her death and talked about what an important activist she had been.
Said she was a fearless giant and progressive voice, and she was known as an AIDS warrior, getting people tested, getting them treated, overcoming HIV stigma. And in 2015, the Rochester LGBT community set up a college scholarship in her name that is still given out today.
Mm-hmm. Now, why don't you tell us about Jean Hoff?
Well, Jean Hoff has died at 85, a close personal friend whom I first met in 1976 in the gay Catholic group Dignity. That's how long ago it was. She was a pioneering transsexual, she used that term, psychiatrist. In 1976, she took over the practice of Dr. Harry Benjamin, who coined the term transsexual. She was in private practice in New York in those days. She was 100% discreet about her patients, so, can't tell you about any of them. Part of her treatment of her trans and gay patients was helping them come out for their psychological health. So when she had gender confirmation surgery in 1978, at the age of 39 in Queens, New York, she did a national half-hour television special called Becoming Jean, hosted by the hosts of something called Not for Women Only, started by Barbara Walters, but hosted by Dr. Frank Field and Lynn Redgrave. And I'd like to, this was done in her home in Chelsea. We're going to link to it in our email, the whole thing. It's a wonderful film. But here's the last minute or so of Jean talking about what she wants from the rest of us.
Jean, how do you want us to accept you? What can we do?
Well, it may not be necessary for you to go to a lot of trouble to learn about accepting transsexuals if you have a general principle, and that is mind your own business, I suppose. It boils down to that. If you are meddling in the life and freedom of someone else, you ought to do so very cautiously and make sure that you're entitled to do so and that they'll be better off for you having been there. Some psychiatrists learn soon, and all I hope learn eventually, that you must not meddle destructively in people's lives. We don't have as much power over people as we would like sometimes, fortunately, but we sometimes have a great deal of power to mess them up, and you have to be very careful not to do that. You leave little footprints on people's minds that are very hard to erase, and so unnecessarily. I suppose we all have to drink some water from the well of despair, but so many of us drink so liberally, and it's poured on us in some cases. It's not necessary. It's just not necessary. So if you take the position that people are all right until they have proved that they're not, you're not likely to harm me, and I'll do my best to justify that confidence.
As a trans psychiatrist treating trans people, she did hold that sex and gender were different things, that sex was reproductive function and that gender, she said, look, I'm a woman, I can't be a female. But that is the way she approached it. But she was, when she had her operation, she said, I not only have a woman's body, but a good one, and I glory in it.
Lovely. Absolutely lovely. We also lost here in New York City, Stephen Luttwak at the very young age of 64. He was a composer. One of his credits was A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder on Broadway, off
Yes,
Broadway.
That was his only Broadway show, and it won the Tony.
But a very successful and popular composer of theatrical music for theater, among other things. He leaves his husband, Michael McGowan, who's a choreographer, and their daughter, Elliot Rose.
And in paying tribute to lesbian activist Amber Hollabaugh last week, we did mention one of her early partners, Esther Newton, but neglected to mention her partner of the last 26 years, novelist Jennifer Levin. Hollabaugh also had relationships with Honey Lee Cottrell and Leslie Feinberg. Newton said that Amber was a central figure in the opposition to Prop 6 in California in 1978 that would have banned gay teachers and teachers who supported gay rights, and said that when Dan White was let off with a manslaughter charge in the murders of Milk and Moscone, Amber gave a fiery speech that set off the 1979 White Night riots in San Francisco.
And she also was a co-founder of Queers for Economic Justice, which is now closed in New York. Her fundamental focus was on economic inequality, and she pursued that relentlessly for many years. We have a long way to go, though. And we lost Betsy Rawls, who, if you're not following the golf world, you probably don't know her, but she was one of the greatest golfers ever. She died at 95. She was one of the winningest, as they say, golfers, winning 55 tournaments and 4 U.S. Opens, tying Mickey Wright for the most ever.
And in that picture, she's winning the LPGA championship at the age of 41.
She was crackerjack. She was in all the halls of fame. And she graduated from the University of Texas with a Phi Beta Kappa degree in physics. She was planning to be a physicist, and Wilson Sporting Goods offered to subsidize a golf career for her. And she said, oh, that'll be more fun. I think I'll go do that.
Because she said, golf is the greatest thing that ever happened in humanity.
I love that. She was also the president of the LPGA for years. She was the first female rules official to officiate at a men's tournament. She just did it all in golf, and everybody adored her. And I'm glad she lived to 95.
And survived by her partner, Janet Davis, and 3 children, 10 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren.
They were together for 41 years.
Wow.
Yeah. A couple of other things. The new administrator of the Human Resources Administration in New York City is an out gay man, Scott French, who worked there for some years and is now taking over as the previous administrator was there for 40 years. I think so. And Methodist churches in Ohio are leaving the denomination in droves. And now there are 961 Methodist churches in Western Ohio. 350 of them have disaffiliated from the main denomination.
I'd call it an amicable divorce, and they're all going to be better off separately.
Well, and they get to keep their property. That used to be a big fight when other churches disaffiliated. All right, international news. We need to move along, and we got a lot of
horrified by the war in the Middle East. But we learned this week that one of the Israeli soldiers who fell to Hamas trying to defend the kibbutz was Captain Sagi Golan on October 7th. That's him there on the left. He was about to be married to his male partner there in the picture with him, Omer Ohana, on October 20th, with the song I Was Fortunate to Love by Israeli star, who's out, Ivri Lieder, accompanying them down the aisle. Instead, Lieder sang it at the funeral. He was a reservist who rushed to the front as soon as he heard of the attacks. The couple planned to have children, and his sperm is frozen, and his mother's wish is that his partner will be able to raise the father of her grandchildren.
Will be able to raise the grandchildren as their father.
Right.
The government sent someone to inform the partner of his partner's death, but the guy they sent was very uncomfortable about making this announcement to a same-sex partner, said you're going to have to go to the defense ministry to get any kind of official notice. Well, now the government has the Knesset has now voted to have the government recognize the widowers or widows of same-sex partners killed in battle. What about everybody else?
Right. Look, and it's not like we just care about gay people who are dying over there. That's just an angle of our show, and we report on LGBTQ angles left out of the mainstream media oftentimes. Every death in this war is horrifying.
In Japan, a court has struck the requirement that trans people be sterilized before being able to change their documents. And I do want to just emphasize the mistake I made 2 weeks ago. I said the new leader of Poland was out gay. Well, he's not. But the new opposition leader in Greece is an out gay man. And that was the confusion I had.
And I want to follow up on my report about, we said that the conservative government was going to do conversion therapy in the King's Speech and finally do it after promising it for 5 years. Well, they had a big pushback from the conservative right-wingers, the evangelicals, and now they're going to leave it out again.
Gay games coming up in Hong Kong next week. That'll be interesting to see how out everyone can be there. And in South Korea, as long as we're in Asia, a court has upheld the ban on gay sex in the military because it is a problem for combat readiness and discipline. Have they not heard of the Spartan Army? Have I got that right?
In Brazil, soap opera star Amaury Lorenzo has come out, that's him on the right, as part of the LGBTQ community, he said. He co-stars as a closeted gay cowboy in love with an out gay man played by out gay Diego Martins there. He says, it may be that soon I will marry another man, cis or trans, a woman, cis or trans. I know the public is curious about my sexuality. I have no problems with that. I'm a theater teacher, and I have 3 students who were murdered for being gay, one by his own father. How can I not be in this fight?
Thank you. The Vatican is not really in the fight at the moment.
Well,
go ahead.
So you have the big synod over there. During the synod, the Pope, he didn't include gay people on the panels, but he did encounter Dignity USA's Marianne Duddy Burke. We have a picture there in the Vatican. She was one of the 4 leaders of the global network of Rainbow Catholics welcome to a general audience. She called it unprecedented in 50 years of the dignity movement and a step towards greater inclusion. She urged him to be more direct about his support for getting rid of sodomy laws around the world. But, she did all the talking. At the end of it, he just said, Avanti, which means keep moving forward. They gave him gifts and things, but
they're going to, nothing for women really, except some meaningless statement, nothing for LGBTQ. This group is going to meet for another year and then come out with a report. Don't hold your breath.
Time's a wasting. People are dying.
Yeah. Austria is getting ready to pay 33 million euros to those who were wrongly convicted for consensual gay sex. The the justice minister apologized and called it a great injustice, but people are not so thrilled that that's enough money.
Why don't we do that here?
Yeah, that's true. It's more than they're giving here. In Taiwan.
Sorry? Yeah.
In Taiwan, 180,000 people turned out to march for Pride, almost as many as Orlando, including the current vice president of the country there in the middle with a rainbow scarf around his neck.
Lai Ching-te.
Yeah. He is considered the front runner to be elected president next year.
He said they have equal marriage rights there. And he said equal marriage is not the end. It's the starting point for diversity.
Although China may have something to say about that. In Jamaica, the Supreme Court has once again upheld the sodomy law. Only Parliament can change it. They're very stubborn in Jamaica. And in Budapest, Hungary, the government has banned anyone under 18 from attending the World Press photo exhibit because there are 5 photos by a Filipino photographer that have some gay reference, probably a rainbow flag or something. Thank you, Viktor Orban. Thank you, Donald Trump.
The role model for Mike Johnson.
Yeah, we're running out of time. Right. AIDS news, the Congress has not renewed PEPFAR. The authorization ran out. We'll see what happens with that. And entertainment news.
Well, I watched Fellow Travelers starring Matt Bomer and Jonathan Bailey. We got a picture of them in bed. And it's a very sexy series. They start out as closeted lovers in the Joe McCarthy era in D.C. in 1952. It is the gayest show on TV. It's an 8-part series. It's going to have many more storylines with other kinds of couples and things. But, it goes right up into the AIDS crisis. It really shows the destructiveness of the closet. Joe McCarthy is a character, as is Roy Cohn, not as theatrical as they were in real life. I
thought it was a little superficial, but I'm assuming that as they go through 8 parts, it'll get a little deeper.
Yeah.
I thought they just sort of skipped over the surface a little. And I was amused with everyone freaking out at the men in bed together when we just saw last year on The Gilded Age, which is now back for season 2, men in bed together naked. And Gilded Age has come back. They put this shot in the recap part of the show at the top. And then one of those guys gets beaten up by going into a bar and supposedly setting off to have sex with a guy who instead beats him badly. So, and we have Nathan Lane and Cynthia Nixon, and that's
and Oscar Wilde's supposed to be a character, but is given no lines. Anyway, an alert on a very great play coming to America called Our Class, about a horrific pogrom in Poland in 1941 when Christians turned against the Jews that they grew up with. And it's a wonderful play. It's going to be at BAM in January. I'm mentioning it because it's going to be a hard ticket, and I'm just highly recommending it because I saw it about 10 years ago.
Sad on The Amazing Race. The one gay couple there is out of the race. They were kind of good, 2 men who will be missed. And you say Fellow Travelers may be the gayest show on U.S. TV, but Sex Education, which just finished its 4th and final season, could not have been more LGBTQ throughout. And the last season is spectacular and has as guest stars Hannah Gadsby is throughout the last season, Hannah Waddingham from Ted Lasso, Stephen Fry, Dan Levy are all in Sex Education.
Wow.
Netflix. Catch up with it. It really made me cry in the last season.
Wow. And the Bayard Rustin movie is out in theaters November 3rd and on Netflix November 17th, starring Coleman Domingo as gay civil rights leader Bayard Rustin.
Sunday, November 12th on MSNBC, Sunday night at 10 p.m., Serving in Secret, a documentary subtitled Love, Country, and Don't Ask, Don't Tell. This is a little late for that, but what the hell.
Talk about Frank.
I'm just opening my mouth to talk about that. Frank, P-H-R-A-N-C, Frank was a huge star, lesbian punk folk singer. She did it all in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we haven't heard about her for a while, but she's back with her art in an exhibit in LA at the Craig Krull Gallery in Santa Monica through December 2nd. That's Frank now. We have a picture of her, an album cover in Positively Frank from the early 90s. But she didn't just sing. She was a Tupperware saleswoman. There she is doing that. Lesbians did everything. But she is a fantastic artist now. And the exhibit is called Frank, the Butch Closet. Really, if you are on the West Coast, you got to go see this. She makes a lot of art out of cardboard. And when asked why, she said, well, it's free. I can go pick it up in an alley somewhere. But she's very smart and thoughtful, and her music is wonderful.
And if you're on the, yes, go ahead. And if you're on the West Coast, the Fantastics musical, which played for like 40 years in New York, has a gay version now. The lovers are two guys, and the parents are mothers instead of fathers. It's at the in Cathedral City through November 12th. They say it's coming to Broadway. I can't believe that because it's too small a show, but maybe it is coming to New York at some point.
And coming out momentarily, Nyad, the movie about Diana Nyad with Annette Bening and Jodie Foster as her sometimes coach, sometimes lover. And our director, Rich, is telling me that he likes my Lana Turner lighting. We've turned Gay USA into TV noir.
Oh, it's great that we can still laugh.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, I think we have lots of little signposts to be hopeful about, even as the world is collapsing around us. So it'll be a race to the finish. I won't be here to talk to you about it next week. Marin will be back, but then I will be back for infinite amounts of time.
That will be great to have you back again. Thanks for being with us. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Marin, for filling in. And Andy, will see you next week.